We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us this morning, talking about suicide prevention, and doing so. We could talk about this every week. It's a worthwhile topic to get out there and educate folks on, but of course in the wake of some of these more high-profile individuals that have committed suicide, it gets the dialogue going. We have two great guests with us this morning from the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network, Joanne Perley and Misty Leitsch, and thanks both of you for coming on this morning. As we went to the break, I guess we were talking about, some of the lines that are out there. Obviously there's the national helpline, right, or the Lifeline, 1-800, and we'll give this number throughout the show, 273-8255, but Misty, you were also telling me during the break there's a text line too.
Right, absolutely. So not only do we have the ability to call someone and reach out for help, but now if, for example, you're maybe afraid to pick up the phone and dial a number, you can actually text the letters TN for Tennessee to 741-741. And what's really great about this is, especially for our youth, that they don't know how to hold a telephone up like this. They operate a phone with their thumbs.
Exactly.
And so it's a beautiful resource for anyone who's struggling with thoughts of suicide, and the ability to get a response back from a trained crisis counselor who can help de-escalate the situation. They'll text them back, and it's free. It is absolutely 100% free, and it's an incredible resource.
And did you say you punch in TN and then 741-741?
Yeah. So in the where you would typically type in the recipient, you would type in 741-741, and in the body of the text, you initiate the conversation with the letters TN to let the crisis responder know you're from Tennessee.
Gotcha. Okay, that's excellent. I'm glad I did not know that was out there. That's fantastic. And you're absolutely right about younger people this generation. Texting is the way to go. What a good idea. Let's take a few calls. We'll go to Lucy. Lucy, good morning.
Hey y'all.
Hey, Lucy.
Listen, ladies, I want to ask you a question. I think we can all agree that the brain chemistry in our brains is not a very delicate balance up there.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, when I was young, which was probably a long time ago relative to y'all, kids weren't allowed to have caffeine. And somehow along about 20, 30 years ago, we started saying it was okay for them to drink caffeine. Then Red Bull came out. There is a thing called caffeine psychosis, sleep deprivation psychosis, and these kids are young and strong these days, and they push their bodies and they use these things. And to me, these are drugs, not sleep deprivation psychosis, but caffeine, and you combine those things. And then not only that, we have stomach medications now, and we've had these discussions about drugs related to Prilosec that alter your brain chemistry, not your stomach, your brain chemistry. And one of the side effects of that is dementia and depression. CBS this morning is having a thing on drugs and depression side effects of them. They've got a new pain medication called Blue 101 that they're developing now that's not going to work on receptors in the brain, but in your spinal cord. So I'm thinking of Robin Williams, and I like how you rephrase suicide. He died by suicide, and people were just shocked, but Robin Williams had a brain disorder, and he was also taking medication for it. From what I understand, one of the side effects may have been suicide.
Okay, interesting point. I mean, you want to comment a bit on, her point of, I don't know, medicines, substances that are out there, substance abuse maybe having a role in suicide?
Yeah, and on several different medications. I know just watching TV and seeing commercials, you always sort of hear that as being a possible side effect.
When they read down the side effects, and there's a zillion of them, and one might cause depression. Kind of like, why would I want to take this? I think what I have right now is better than the side effects. But go ahead.
It can be, but definitely there is a huge correlation between substance abuse, substance misuse, and suicide ideation, risk of suicide. So to her point, I mean that is definitely a huge that can play a huge risk factor with that.
Are the highest risk? What age group right now is committing the most suicides? The highest risk for suicide? Dying by, right, see? There you go. Dying by suicide. I'm sorry. And
No,
I'm going to have to get used to that.
Yeah.
Dying by suicide. Is it seniors? Is it, what's highest is what?
So if we look at rates, then it is seniors, 75 and above. But
Okay.
if we look at the actual numbers of people who die by suicide, then it's our age group 10 to 24.
Wow. And has that changed over time? Has it become more so that way, or has that pretty much kind of been the trend of those who die by suicide?
So we are continuously seeing an uptick in the trend, the number, and the rates of suicide. So Tennessee's rate of suicide is higher than the national average, and we have seen that consistently in the last few years. 2014, we had a slight dip in the rates of suicide. Unfortunately, 2015 and 2016, we saw those rates increase again. So,
Okay, and is it just this day and age more stress on young people? Who knows? There's a lot of reasons, I'm
right,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we, there's definitely never just one reason for a suicide.
Okay.
So there's always multiple factors involved, which is part of why every suicide is very individual and the components and the circumstances surrounding it.
Okay, so it has to be, obviously, when you make these calls for help, treated on an individual basis. There's no template for, okay, this is what we need to do for everyone who's dealing with this. Is it necessarily always associated with depression?
No, not always.
It's not, is it? Huh?
No.
Wow.
So in our youth and our young people especially, Lucy, who called, referenced the brain and the development. So we know that our brains are not fully developed until we're around the age of 23 and 24. And the last part of our brain to fully develop is our prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of the brain that controls your impulsivity, your ability to reason, your ability to your logic and your reasoning skills. And so in our youth, not having the ability to control their impulses, we see a lot of youth suicides being an impulsive act.
Okay.
Not necessarily related to depression. I will say that most, if not all, suicides can be tied back to some type of loss, whether it's a loss of relationship, a loss of stability, or even a fear, right, of punishment, or so there's always, there's themes within suicides, but they are always very individual.
Wow. Okay, let's take another call. We'll go to Grady. Grady, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hi, Grady.
I've had friends that have committed suicide, and death is such banality, but one man had committed suicide in front of his 10-year-old son, and his son was the one that realized his daddy had committed suicide. The other two were elderly, and they couldn't afford the medications they needed to get. And I know that I've killed so many jellyfish when I grew up. Nothing's going to change the brain power that I have. But, to me, it's a selfish event. It's something that we can try to prevent, try to talk. But for this fellow to commit suicide in front of his 10-year-old son, I have no respect for it. I'll hang up with y'all's comment.
Well, and that's, again, an example, and we've had, unfortunately, in the past few weeks, there was this horrible murder-suicide where the guy killed 4 children and himself.
Yeah.
So I have no sympathy for that dude. People are furious. I don't care. You want to kill yourself? Okay, that's horrible. But he took 4 children? I'm sorry. Nothing you can say is going to change the way I feel about this guy. I just don't want to hear it. Okay, but I understand he must, who knows what issues he had. But I have a real problem with that. Now, is that a perception thing? Am I looking at that wrong?
I think we all, like I said earlier, we've all got our own set of beliefs or mores, and that's sort of what guides us to how we might think definitely about a murder-suicide situation, about a suicide situation. Of course, having a 10-year-old watch and then find a suicide, that's of course awful. Tragic. And Grady, I want to A, thank you for calling in, and B, I'm very sorry for your losses. That's always something that we want to make sure that we pass on as a lost survivor, as those many of you that have lost loved ones or maybe have that lived experience. We want to make sure that you know that we you're here and that there is help. There's many different survivor groups across the state. There's a huge one here in Nashville. There's actually in Franklin, there is a youth survivor group specifically for youth 18 and under. So that definitely lots of those good resources that we have here in Tennessee.
And I think Grady brought up a good point about how suicide is preventable. It's one of the most preventable ways of dying. And unfortunately, it's the second leading cause of death for people 10 to 24. More people die by suicide than by homicides.
That's hot. Yeah. Wow.
I mean, twice as many people
and when you see
die
all
by
these
suicide.
unfortunate homicides, that's saying something.
Right. And so our organization, we offer free trainings on warning signs, how to intervene, where to get help. And we want the message to be that the more people that are trained in our community to be able to spot these warning signs and reach out and offer help, the safer our state will be.
Oh, I agree. So, okay, and I'm glad you mentioned that, the warning signs, and I guess it ranges. So often you hear, and we don't know all the details, but in the aftermath of, say, Anthony Bourdain, who I think most would agree, on the surface had an unbelievable job, a wonderful, a crazy great job, and he was very good at it, and he had many close friends, and based on what many of them, they didn't see this coming. I think maybe they knew he had maybe more of a personality where he could be moody at times, but who isn't at times? And so does everyone show, if you could go back after the fact for sure, oh, I missed that? Or is it possible that, you know, someone like Anthony Bourdain hit it so well no one ever had any idea?
So hindsight is 20/20.
Sure.
It always is.
You
right?
go back and say, oh, well, maybe when he said that I should have known. But
exactly. And it's also not just what an individual might say to us. We wish that everybody was thinking about suicide would say, hey, Joanne, I'm thinking about suicide right now. Help me. That would be ideal, but rarely are they that straightforward. More likely it's subtle changes in behavior, changes from their norm, whatever their norm is. We don't care what societal norm is, but whatever their specific norm is, situational changes, as Misty mentioned, a loss. Now, whatever a loss can mean, it can be different for me than what Misty would be. If I lost my cats, that's a big deal for me. Yeah. She might not care. She's more of a dog person, right? So it's knowing what those losses are, knowing that they are very specific to everyone.
Okay, yeah, so go ahead.
And it's about the person's perception of that loss, just like Joanne was saying. You know, she cares deeply for her cats, and so her perception of losing her cats would be devastating. And so what one person may think isn't such a big deal, someone else could very easily perceive that as it's the end of their world.
Yes, and so when someone does perceive that, and in their mind it's that, whatever the loss is, but it's that big a deal. So when they seek help, how is it that you're able to change their mindset? And I've met several folks who had attempted suicide that survived and got help, and they're like, thank goodness I did. It took a while, but how do you change their mind at that point when they reach out?
So there's a training we offer. It's a 2-day training, and it's called ASSIST, which stands for Applied Suicide Skills Intervention Training. Did I say that correctly?
Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. Yeah.
Yes, what she said. Yes. So the whole premise of this particular training is that for people who are suicidal, they feel as though they only have 2 options, life or death. And life is too difficult at the moment for them to live, and so they perceive that their only other option is death. And what this training does is it teaches caregivers in the community, gatekeepers in the community, people in the community, how to offer a third option to someone who is potentially suicidal. And that third option is safety for right now. I understand you think life is too difficult to live right now. What can we do to keep you safe for now until we can get past this? And so being able to not necessarily sympathize with someone who's suicidal, but truly empathize with them can go a very long way. Oftentimes, people just need to be heard. And that is enough to de-escalate a situation.
Now, is that sometimes you hear people saying that that attempt was a cry for help, but they didn't really mean it? Is that a misnomer? Is that true, where maybe someone goes through the motions as a cry for help and hopefully they're hoping in the back of their mind someone steps in, or is that just not the way it really works?
I think if someone is verbally stating that they're thinking about suicide, or they're securing access to lethal means to plan their attempt, whether or not it's a cry for help or attention, they need help and attention.
You're right, absolutely. But the truth be told, if you were someone dead set on killing yourself, and this may have been the case of Anthony Bourdain, you know, you're not telling a soul, and no one can stop you.
Unfortunately, that can be the case, right?
Yeah,
Everybody,
I mean, if you hide it and no one has any idea, and I don't know if it was with Anthony Bourdain, but usually when someone expresses that, that to me gives a glimmer of hope that this person is saying this and trying to express their pain, and why else would they share it except maybe hoping someone else could help them? And it's the ones that don't say a darn thing and then boom. I mean, because truly you can't stop them if you don't know about it. So we'll take a break on that note. We'll be back with more of your phone calls right after this. Is it considered